All these people in Hollywood that have passed away, the first thing I think about is what did they believe about eternity? I was scrolling through Instagram, like most of us do, and noticed one account where Ozzy Osbourne's picture just stood out. Dylan, for over what, 10, 15 years?
10 years.
You've been attending celebrity book signings, appearances, conventions, and meeting with famous people, believing that you were supposed to talk to them about the Bible and about Jesus. When you have it on your heart to give somebody a Bible, you've personalized it, you've had their names imprinted on the front of this Bible. You met Ozzy Osbourne and his family?
Yes. I had the honor and privilege. They did an event in Philadelphia. It was Ozzy, Sharon, Jack, and Kelly. I've been to meet and greets where you can't hardly get somebody to look up from. They're just in signing mode, moving.
Yeah.
But Ozzy was not like that. He was very personal. I personally know that they were rushing people, and he fussed at them and said, "No, I want to meet people." He was very kind to fans.
You brought this Bible with Ozzy
Yes.
Osbourne's name imprinted on it.
So I walk up to him, and every time I go to meet a celebrity, I do my research, which we'll talk about here in a minute. So I knew where Ozzy stood spiritually. Of course, Geezer Butler is the lyricist for most of the Black Sabbath music, but they have a song called After Forever, which talks about can our souls be saved? So in an interview with The Guardian, this was back around, I think it was 2014, he brought up, he said, I identify more as Christian than anything else. And then in that same interview, he also said, I'd love to read the Bible more, but it's written in a language I don't understand. Which the only way I could interpret that was one, Ozzy's dyslexic or was dyslexic. So already he had that challenge. Plus,
Right.
it was written in Old English. So it was harder for him to comprehend that. So I got him a New Believer's Bible, which is an NLT. Um, just much more modern English. So I mentioned that I shook his hand, told him the reason I came to meet you today is because I love and care about you and your soul, and I got you this gift. And he was okay. Well, let me see it. So I pulled it out, and as I was pulling it out, I was telling him what I just told you. I read this interview where you said this, and he goes, "Yes, yes." And I said, "Well, I got you this." And he said, "Well, I still won't be able to understand it." And I said, "No, no, it's a modern English translation." And he opened it up. He immediately turned to where the Gospels were, and he looked at it for a moment. And he looked back up at me and he said, "I can understand that. Thank you." And he just had the sweetest smile on his face. He shook my hand. Thank you so much for coming to meet me. I said, "Of course, it was worth it all." And then he was, "Where are you from?" And I said, "I'm from East Tennessee, about an hour north of Knoxville." And he started talking about Randy Rhoads. That was the last show. Randy played with him back during the Blizzard of Oz tour. And that was really about it. Because again, that's with this ministry, sometimes we'll have 5-minute conversations, 30-minute conversations. I've had somebody talk to me as long as almost 3 hours.
Wow.
Other times it's, "Oh, that's nice. Thank you." Which you can compare that to street evangelism. You don't know what you're going to get. Some people want to hear all about it. Some are going to look at it in their own private time. And I was like, okay, that went decent with Ozzy. And then I went into the side room and started talking to the rest of his family. And they were all very, very sweet. I kind of thought that was the end of what I would know this side of heaven. Got the photo again later. You saw me. I was right in between Sharon and Ozzy. I told him thank you guys again, and specifically to Ozzy. Love you, praying for you, and thank you very much. 2 weeks later, I'm at a horror Comic Con. It's called Scarefest in Lexington, Kentucky. Jack Osbourne was going to be there, and I thought, this is Jack's first event after that. I had probably a 30-minute conversation with Jack. And it was a very intimate, great conversation about Jesus and searching for spiritual truth. So I thought, I don't want to freak him out and him think I'm going to every show he's going to, because that wasn't the case. I just was going to happen to be there. But I was like, if it's God's will, it'll happen. Well, I'm standing there, and there's the hustle and bustle of anybody who's been to a Comic Con. You know how it is. Sometimes you get stuck standing one place and you can't move. Well, that was one of these cases. I was wearing the same jacket that day that I was wearing with Ozzy, and it's a Danny Goki jacket. It says "Love God, Love People" on the back. Jack comes and taps me on the shoulder. He goes, "Excuse me, were you in Philly last week?" I said, yeah, that was me. And he said, "You're the guy who gave my dad the Bible, aren't you?" I said, "That was me." He said, "So I first want to tell you a cool story about that and also tell you how much dad loved that." He said, "We were putting him on the elevator at the end of the night," which keep in mind also, because Ozzy was calm, took his time with everybody, he was at this event 5 hours after it closed. He didn't go up to his hotel room until about 2 in the morning.
Wow.
Like, and he knew that was going to happen. But again, he just had that loving caringness about him because, and that was one thing Jack and I said. He said, "Thank you for not seeing my dad as just this evil person." I said, "Listen, I've seen evil people. I've been around evil. Your dad's not evil. He's a big teddy bear." He said, "He is. It's a facade." He said, "The media back in the day, they really pushed the dark image and he embraced it and branded it. It's a character." He said, "So we're getting on the elevator," and he said, "Where's my Bible? I want my Bible." And he said, the look on everyone's faces, like the convention people, he said, even my face was like, "Did Ozzy Osbourne just say he wants his Bible?" And he said he was very insistent. He said, then it clicked with me. "Oh, the guy I met, that's it." And he said, "No, Dad, it's down in the autograph room. We'll get it tomorrow." And he goes, "No, I want it now." The convention was Friday, Saturday, Sunday. The family was going to be there all 3 days. Ozzy was just doing Friday and Sunday. He was taking Saturday off the rest. So Ozzy made the point, "I want to look at that tomorrow on my day off." So Jack said, "I went downstairs, helped him find the Bible, and I brought it back up." And he goes, "There was other stuff. There, there was a letter in another book." So we go back down, we get it, we come back up. And he said the next day, he said, we came up to take a break from the show around lunch. And he said, Dad brought it up and said, "Did you all get something like this?" And he said, "We were all, yep, we all got something." He said, "So we all just started round table Osborne family lunch talking about the gospel material." And he didn't go into detail what they talked about, what they said, but he said, "My dad has gotten a lot of gifts through the years. He doesn't keep many gifts because he's not a pack rat. There's nowhere to put it. A lot of it's just random stuff." He said, "But that is one of his most prized possessions. It's on his nightstand." And he said, "And anytime somebody's been coming to the house asking, 'Hey, how was the show?' He's like, 'Oh, Sharon,'" which I can hear it. "Go get my Bible." And you'll show him his name on the cover, be like, "Look how easy it is for me to read this and understand it." And I was like, man, that is just makes you want to cry because and this goes not just for celebrities but people we meet in day-to-day life. You don't always know this side of heaven what sharing the gospel or praying with somebody or telling them about Jesus. You don't know the impact it's had on them.
You might have been the only person in Ozzy Osbourne's life to ever gift him a Bible.
And that's the way we have to think of it, not just with a celebrity, but we can't take for granted that everybody that is in our circle has people influencing them with the gospel. One of my favorite points I make to people is God has put you where you are in life for a specific reason, for a specific purpose. You're not there by accident. And God has placed different people in your life for different reasons. The most important thing we can do as believers is to tell people about Jesus and how they can be saved. Because that was the last great commandment that Jesus gave: go into all the world and preach the gospel. He didn't say, sit back, hope the preacher does his job. He said, you go, tell. It's so simple, but it's so forgotten.
Well, and there are a lot of religions who don't believe that don't believe in proselytizing. They don't believe in evangelism. But if you talk to anybody who's had a really good steak, I tell people, or a really good sushi restaurant, they promote what they like. And I think that sometimes even the term evangelism has become something of a, whether you call it controversial or a misunderstood term,
You're
when
exactly right.
I mean, I met somebody who, gosh, was an SEO evangelist the other day. I said, I didn't even know there was an SEO evangelism area. Well, there are tech evangelists. They go out and they tell about their technology, this technology. They
Yes.
promote what they think is worthy. So I just would tell people, you like the latest, Michelin star restaurant. Some people like to tell people about God and Jesus and the Bible. So with Ozzy, do you know if he ever prayed the prayer of salvation, and do you go that far with these celebrities?
With Ozzy, I don't know. Nobody knows for a fact where anybody's soul is. I can't tell you where you stand with God. You can't tell me where I stand with God. We don't know them personally, so we can't judge that. We can't assume that. As far as you saying, have I gone as far as to pray the sinner's prayer? So I've heard feedback from celebrities accepting Christ. The best story I have is Jerry Lee Lewis. This was 6 years ago. Again, it's just such a God story how God was making this work even 50 years ago before I was born. So my grandfather served in the Korean War. He served with Jerry Lee Lewis's best friend.
Wow.
Made the comment to him. He said, "Well, if you really know Jerry, you'll get me and my wife tickets when we get back to the States." Well, he didn't just get my papaw tickets. He brought Jerry to my papaw's house. So there was a time frame in around the 60s that my papaw knew Jerry. I have Polaroids of them together, different things. And I tried to get my papaw to come with me, but he was like, my health isn't good enough. And Jerry had said with The Guardian, I think it was 2015, this interview, he said, "I wake up every night worried I'm going to wake up in hell." He had no assurance of salvation. And I'm like, that is pretty bold for somebody to say.
That's like a cry for help.
It was like a cry for help. He came wheeling in a wheelchair, and I approached him. I said, "Mr. Lewis," and at first he was going to brush me off. Anybody who ever had been around Jerry Lee Lewis would tell you he was a very curmudgeon person. Lovable, but curmudgeon. And I told him my papaw said hi, used Roy Reynolds, the name. And he stopped. He said, "How do you know that name?" I said, that's my papaw. And he let me know in so many words. He wasn't sure he believed me. And I pulled up I showed him the Polaroids of him with my papaw. I showed him pictures of me with my papaw, and he goes, "Well, oh my goodness!" And his walls were lowered. Again, God was using my papaw, and he didn't even know it. Um, and so I brought up that interview, started talking to him about it, and he reiterated right there. It was 2019. He was like, "Yes, I do wake up every night worried I'm going to wake up in hell. I've lived a horrible life. I've been a terrible person." Just went on and on and on, and so full gospel presentation. Here's how you can be saved. Here's how you can have assurance. Nobody's too far gone. And that's another thing with the whole Ozzy thing. People are like, "Oh, he was too far gone." I'm like, was Saul too far gone? He was murdering and persecuting Christians, but he repented. And then you'll have the same people go, "Well, yes, but Saul, who became Paul, he completely devoted his life to Christianity and serving the Lord, and Ozzy didn't." Well, maybe Ozzy gave it and gave his life to Christ at the end. We don't know, because if you look at the thief on the cross, that thief on the cross didn't do anything to further the gospel. All he said was, "Remember me, Lord." He acknowledged with his lips that Jesus Christ was Lord, and Jesus said, "Today you will be with me in paradise." He didn't have to be baptized. He didn't have to go to seminary. He didn't have to go profess Christianity or following Christ to anybody. He believed and he was saved. So again, we see through scriptures, it doesn't matter when, as long as you give your life to Christ, and it's with a sincere transformation, change, and acknowledgement in your heart. So we got right up to the sinner's prayer with Jerry. I mean, it was, you can make that decision today. It doesn't matter you're here in an airport terminal. You don't have to be at a church. And he was sitting there, and his eyes were kind of going back and forth. He said, "I'd like to keep talking to you more. I'd like to keep thinking, but I'm afraid I'm going to miss my flight." To be fair, he was pushing it. And I told him, I said, "Well, I want you to know my contact information is in the back of all the material. If you want to get a hold of me, please do not hesitate." And he was really sweet. I had one of my papaw's old vinyl that back in the 60s, they would just slap an address on the actual record. They didn't even put it in a box. So they would put it on the record and mail it out that way, which I think the Postal Service was probably more gentle back then. But so I was like, "Hey, real quick, would you mind signing this?" And he was like, "Oh my goodness!" And he loved that it had the Roy Reynolds return address on it, and he signed it, and we took a picture, and that was that. A week later, I go to the mailbox. There's a letter in the mail from Jerry Lee Lewis, like, "Return address, Jerry Lee Lewis, Dylan Novak." And I was like, "What?" And again, I was like, this is going to go one of two ways. He's either going to be really receptive, or, "Hey, leave me alone." And it was the shortest, simplest note. "Do not worry. Jesus is my personal savior. Jerry Lee Lewis.
Wow.
Same signature word. I mean, because again, I'm it was dated 2 days after I'd met him. So I'm like, I guess he flew home and really reflected on it. Shortly after that, he posted on Facebook, I'm going to be doing a gospel album. I really want to tell my fans that some amazing stuff that has happened. I'm like, well, this is incredible. He's going to use his platform. He ended up having a stroke. He got sent to assisted living, which is where he stayed until he passed away a few years later. But he did get a few of the gospel albums, or some of the gospel songs done, some of them with Jimmy Swaggart, who was his cousin. A little full circle there.
You've given two nods to Jimmy Swaggart, who, rest in peace, also just passed
Mhm.
away within the last,
Yes.
several days of this interview.
Anybody I go to witness to that's in the public eye, I always research, Google, any way, shape, or form to try to find something they've said about faith, their spiritual background. Th- And people would be shocked how many people are like, oh, I'm open to this, or I have questions about this or that. Um, the one that comes to my mind the most, and this is what really began the ministry, was James Taylor. In a 1991 Rolling Stone interview, they referenced his song Fire and Rain and some others. They said, you mentioned Jesus a lot in your songs. Are you a devout Christian? And he said, it's funny, it's almost the exact opposite. I'm agnostic. Both of my parents were atheists, but I would be open to listen if somebody were to share something with me. And so when I met James, um, I referenced that interview, shared the gospel with him. He gave me a hug. We talked for a good while. But he said, that interview was almost 25 years ago. You're the first person to come directly and say something about that. And that just blew my mind away.
What would you say to those out there if they were one of the celebrities that you introduce yourself to in an event, or it's somebody who watches this video and says, why do you have to go out and talk about Jesus so much? Why don't you just respect everybody's beliefs?
Well, if I saw a car coming towards somebody out of control, I would do everything in my power to get that person's attention, to get them out of harm's way. Mind your business. Love is love. Everybody will find their own way. That's not the truth. There has to be an ultimate truth. And Jesus said, I'm the way, the truth, the life. And again, when somebody's like, well, how do you know you had the truth? I look at it historically from a scientific perspective. I've looked at other beliefs. This is the only one that adds up. This is it. I use that car analogy and I said, so imagine your friend, and I grabbed some of the kids and used them as examples. I said, they're out there, they're on their phone, they're zoned out. You see a car hurtling towards them, and you know the car's not paying attention. What are you going to do to get your friend's attention? And they were all like, we're going to yell, we're going to scream, we're going to do everything we can to get their attention and show them the danger that's coming. I'm like, exactly. But you know what a lot of Christians do? There's a car coming. Just we'll either be very quiet about it because we don't want to cause a scene. We don't want to upset the peace. Or worst of all, hey, it's your job. I don't feel like it. You need to go tell them that danger's coming. We as Christians, if you've been saved, if you're watching this, if you've been saved, you know that you've been saved from death unto life eternally. I'm telling anybody watching this who isn't a believer, somebody who has never been saved, accepted Christ as their Lord and Savior, there is the reality of death that each and every one of us will face. And we will all stand before God one day to give an account for the things we have done. I know without a shadow of a doubt, I can't get to heaven on my own, but I know I have put my full faith and trust in Jesus Christ because the Bible says that Jesus lived a perfect, sinless life, died on the cross for our sins. He took the punishment that we deserved so that we could be saved. And salvation, it's a free gift, but we have to accept it. My message is, how can we be quiet when it's a matter of your life? Because to me, it is sharing the gospel, it's a matter of life or death.
Thank you so much, Dylan, for joining us. I know that if anybody has any questions, they can contact you on social media at Celebrity Evangelist, right?
Yes.
And of course, you can go on his website.
The website is celebrityevangelist.org.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you.